Let me just bring my book as well really quickly. 2 minutes, sorry. I was writing down notes on them. Yeah, so we looked at like the marginal multiplier effect, the average what was it called? Average PC, average price consumption, right?
Yes.
Yeah. We looked at the average price consumption, we looked at the marginal price consumption, the marginal price supply, and then we looked at the marginal price withdrawal. So marginal price saving, sorry. So we said how, I remember we talked about how when there's an increase in withdrawal, that means there's a decrease in the multiplier. So this means the withdrawal really means that this includes like the savings and the taxes and the what was the saving, taxes, and what was the M?
All the leakages,
Yes.
saving, taxes, and imports.
Yes. And we talked about how we have to add that up and then we'll get the withdrawal. So withdrawal is basically all those leakages. So like the places you're not spending that money. So that's gonna be withdrawals leaked, and therefore the next firm that will get it will have fewer money or whatever like that.
Yeah. So that is a good recap of what we did. So adding to that and continuing that, we'll start with economic growth today.
Okay, sure.
All right. Now, after we are done with economic growth, we'll go to your coursework and then we'll discuss what you can add or what you've already added.
Sure.
So every economy or every society's main goal is to maximize the welfare, as we have studied before, right?
Yes.
So doing that, increasing the welfare is directly affecting the living standards of people. And so ultimately, the main purpose of the government is to improve the living standards of all the citizens that are living in the country.
Yes.
And to do that, one of the way about is to increase the resources of the country, in a sense that if they invest on human capital, they are actually empowering people, and by that empowerment, they are bringing well-being and better living standards for them, right?
Yes.
So improvement of resources or bringing in additional resources is one way of getting to their ultimate goal, that is of welfare maximization or living standards improvement. Now, to increase the resources, we need economic growth in the country.
Yes.
Right? So this is the context of why we want to study economic growth. Plus, also remember that economic growth is one estimate or one tool of understanding how well the economy is performing. So no matter what, this is calculated every year, and with a lot of effort is being put into calculating this, just because this is one of the measure. If I want to compare Pakistan and India, I would look at their GDP rates and see which country is performing better. GDP, economic growth, it's the same thing.
Okay.
GDP growth or economic growth is the same thing.
Okay.
Let me share my screen. So see, prime responsibility of the government is to improve living standards. That is done by expanding resources, and that leads to economic growth.
Okay.
Now, economic growth can be of two types. Number one is your long-run economic growth, and the other is your short-run economic growth.
Yes.
So in short-run economic growth, we say that when our aggregate output increases,
Okay.
so if, for example, there's an increase in demand, aggregate demand, that causes our output to increase, right?
Yes.
And if there is an increase in our aggregate supply, that also causes our output to increase. So any
Yes.
sort of this increase is termed as short-term economic growth.
Okay.
All right. But for long term, there is always an expansion of productive capacity. Productive capacity means the number of resources that the country has.
Okay.
Whenever there is an increase in the resources, there is long run economic growth. And now you tell me that in this graph of long run and short run aggregate demand, aggregate supply and aggregate demand, SRDS and RT. Which curve do you think would shift for long run economic growth?
If there is an increase in aggregate demand.
I'm asking about long run economic growth.
Okay.
So that is going to be short run economic growth. The one that you have told me,
yes.
that will be short run economic growth.
Okay. So for this one, the supply would move then.
Which one, short run or long run?
Short run.
And why short run?
If the LARS, you're saying if the LARS moves outwards, which one would move?
So you said that if we are looking at, if there is long run economic growth, your short run aggregate supply is going to shift, right? This is what you said.
Yes.
Now I'm asking you, how do you think it is going to like short run aggregate supply is going to shift? Because see, in long run economic growth, we are looking at the productive capacity, which means that we are looking at the overall resources.
Yes.
So now explain.
Okay, so now why would the short run aggregate supply increase? Because if there's an increase in demand and if there's like an increase in like your overall capacity, or you're using your full resources, wouldn't your supply need to move as well if you're efficient or whatever?
So see, let me explain this to you. In short run, so if there is short run, either this is going to increase your output, or this is going to increase your output, right?
Yes.
Either an increase in aggregate supply, short-run aggregate supply, or an increase in
Aggregate demand.
aggregate demand.
Yes.
Now, when we talk about long-run aggregate supply, we are talking about the PPC.
The product profitability curve. Hello, Isha.
Now,
I can hear you.
can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. The product possibility is production possibility.
Yeah.
Yes. Now I'm saying that in the long run, there is an expansion of productive resources. This means that our PPC is shifting outwards, right?
Yes.
So if our full employment was here of all resources, now the full employment has moved to here.
Yes.
So our short run aggregate supply wouldn't shift, rather our long run aggregate supply is going to shift.
Because then you'd have to move the supply, the full resources potential move now. Yes, okay.
Exactly. So this line, long run aggregate supply, is showing you the resources that exist in a country. So if there is an increase in the resources, always remember that your long run aggregate supply is going to shift. There will be no effect on your short run aggregate supply.
Understood. Understood. Okay.
Now the resources could improve or improve. Maybe there's a very good rain and your resources, your land is more fertile, so your resources have improved. Your long run aggregate supply will shift. Maybe
Yes.
there is a flood and houses are like there is urban flooding, and so the roads are destroyed, houses are destroyed. That is also going to reduce our resources, and therefore our long run aggregate supply curve is going to
Move
shift.
inwards. Yes. Okay.
All right, let's move on. What do you think, other than long run goals of achieving achieving high levels of living standards or improving welfare, what could be another objective for for having higher economic growth?
So like companies or businesses can improve like profit or whatever. Maybe also the fact that maybe if there is improvement in overall welfare, maybe that can make people come out of like, it'll have like job opportunities and everything like that for people around in society. Maybe that's resulting in like, an increase in consumption, which can be good for like the government as well, like maybe taxes and everything like that.
Exactly. So providing employment to people,
Yes,
improving business confidence, more taxes, more revenue generation for the government.
yes.
All of these are objectives for economic growth.
Mhm.
Now we move on to talking about real and nominal values. Now, nominal is basically looking at if we are talking about economic growth, so looking at GDP at one point in time. So, if for example, I am looking at the nominal GDP of 2013, then I would take the prices of products in 2013 and the quantities sold of products in 2013, right? And I'll
Mhm.
multiply both of them together to get the GDP.
Yes,
So it is like a current output with current prices. Nominal is,
current output with current prices.
yes, current output with current prices. But when we come to real GDP, we see that real GDP is the one that is adjusted for inflation. This means that I'll take current output with previous prices.
Okay, yeah.
All right. So if, for
Because
example,
you
I'm
want to see
calculating
how much there's been an increase or anything like that, right?
exactly. So real GDP is basically one main like tool for comparing comparing economic growth from year to year basis.
Okay.
Now, what happens in the calculation of real GDP is that for most countries, or for all countries for that matter, they assume or they put 1 year as the base year, right? So for Pakistan, the base year is 2017, right?
Okay.
It used to be 2005, but now recently it changed to 2017. Now, all the calculations of real GDP, the previous prices are going to be of 2017.
Ah, okay.
So even if I'm calculating the GDP for 2023, I'll take the output for 2023 and I'll take the prices for 2017.
Okay. But why isn't it done like the year before? Like, let's say if you're calculating, if you'll take like the output of 2023, why don't you take previous prices of like 2022 then?
It is because the government usually have long-term goals, right?
Okay, yeah.
So so they usually look at, so when there are SDGs or any sort of those things, they are for 10 years.
Okay,
And
okay.
so that is why they keep their like constant year or base year. Like if it's 2017, so now the base year is going to change in 2027.
Okay, makes sense.
All right. So it's
Mhm.
easier to make comparison that way. Now, for every year for 2022, the prices were like the prices are given of 2017. So we can compare that as compared to 2017. In 2022, our GDP was maybe grew by 7%, and in 2023, it grew by 0.6%. So
Mm,
even then we can compare 2002 and 2022 and 2023, just because we have the same base year,
makes sense. Makes sense.
right? Now, if for example, you are given nominal GDP, you can, if you're given nominal GDP, maybe 100, and you want to find, and you're given inflation, that is 20, and you want to find real GDP. You would simply take nominal, you'll subtract inflation from it.
Okay.
So 100 minus 20, you get 80. So 80 is your real GDP. That is how much your economy really grew. Because this 20% effect, if we took 120, that or if we took 100 for that matter, that would have been, if we took 100, that would have been a wrong interpretation of uh, how the economy grew, because 20% of that 100 was just due to an increase in prices.
Okay, okay.
Also remember, your real variable is just your output.
Okay.
So we are only concerned with changes in output. Any change in price is just is not a real thing. Like, it is very temporary. It fluctuates by a whole lot, but we
Yeah.
only look at the increase or decrease in output, and therefore we subtract it from nominal GDP to get how much on a real scale the economy has grown.
Okay, so real GDP is it's the current like prices, a current output with previous prices, and nominal is current output with current prices. But I want to know
Yes.
what's like why do we calculate, what's the purpose of calculating nominal and what's the purpose of calculating real? Like, what's the difference between the two?
Yes. So since the prices are different, um, one is using current prices and one is using base year prices. So the purpose of nominal GDP is to see how much the economy is worth given a certain year. So if I want to see the worth of the economy in 2023, I'll just calculate nominal GDP.
Okay, makes
But
sense.
if I want to make comparison from by previous years, or if I want to make good comparisons between countries, then I would have to look how much the economy has grown compared to last year's.
Okay, makes
And
sense.
that could only happen if I'm taking the prices from last year's rather than this year, because this year would have the inflation factor fixed in it. So our GDP is calculated price into quantity, right? So
Yes.
suppose that it's 2021, our prices and quantity. GDP. So our price was 8, our quantity was 10, our GDP was 80.
Yes.
In 2022, our prices were 10, our quantity was 10, our GDP was 100.
Yes.
There is no real change in output.
Yes.
The only increase in GDP is because of this increase.
Okay. So really the when we are calculating the real, we're gonna see, like you said before, the real variable is output. So we really want to see if there's an increase or decrease in the output. That's the main purpose, right?
Exactly.
Makes sense.
Exactly.
Makes sense.
How about if this was the case? What do you think would be the real GDP here? Or just calculate the GDP?
24.
No, so you multiply them.
Oh yeah, sorry. That is going to be 144. 144, yeah.
Yes.
So there is an increase in output in this one.
There is an increase in output in this one. Exactly. So the real GDP is going to be there. If,
Ah,
for example, our increase in prices is 20%, right?
sorry, Isha, I have a question. Let's say if
Yes.
there's no increase, what would you not say it's real GDP then?
If there is no
If there's
increase in output,
yeah.
so I'll say that the real GDP is similar to the nominal GDP. So
Oh,
the previous year's GDP in a
okay.
sense,
Okay.
because I simply, this is 20%, right?
Yes.
If I subtract 100 from 20, 20 from 100, I
Get
get
you.
80, which
Yeah.
is similar to last year's GDP.
Yeah. Okay, makes sense.
So there
Makes
is no growth in the economy. This is what you can interpret when there is no change in quantity.
makes sense. Makes sense.
All right. Are there any questions?
No. Makes sense.
All right. Let's move on then. The exact definition of nominal value is basically value of an economic variable based on current prices, taking no account of changing prices through time.
Okay. Can you write
Okay?
that definition down?
Yes.
Thank you.
These are the definitions for real value and nominal value.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
No.
Okay. I wrote them down while you were writing them. Yeah.
Uh, Now, so your book has given a quantitative skill which says that converting nominal measurements to real. It says it is worth being aware that the ratio of current nominal value.
Sorry. Hello. Hello.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah. Now I can.
All right. So your book says, so I actually believe that we should do it when we are covering inflation, but
Sure.
they've given it here, so I'll just tell you, but in detail we'll study it when we are doing inflation.
Sure.
So nominal GDP divided by real GDP into 100 gives you consumer price index. This is how we calculate inflation.
Okay.
Consumer price index is a way of calculating inflation, and the formula for consumer price index is to divide your nominal GDP by your real GDP and then multiply it into 100.
Makes sense.
All right, now it's just something for your knowledge, but we'll do it in detail when we are covering inflation.
Mhm.
Let's move on. All right, so economic growth. What is economic growth?
So it's basically the amount, like maybe the government is willing to invest into the welfare to improve the quality of society or people living in that society, right?
Yes.
And then it can be done by different things, such as like we talked about providing people with job opportunities, or increasing incomes of people, so people are more likely to consume more, therefore having an effect on the businesses and everything, and then improving revenue and tax, so that can also affect the government overall society then.
Yes, exactly. Now for this, what is the main difference between nominal and real GDP?
Okay, so real is basically, okay, so yeah, real is there when you take the current output and you take previous prices, and that is, like you said, to compare different levels of outputs or like prices from a certain year, or from like countries, to see how you're doing in terms of GDP. Nominal is to see how you're doing in that certain year. So like you'll take the current output with the current prices, and you'll see how you're doing in that certain year, rather than when real GDP is to compare or contrast previous years and like with countries as well, to see how you're doing.
Exactly. All right. So now that this is done, we'll look at some other sort of definitions. So when we're looking at GDP and its growth together, there is another concept named gross national income.
Is it the same? Oh, okay, that's different. Gross domestic.
What do you think would be the difference between gross national income and gross domestic income or product?
Okay, so gross national income, would it be like maybe in that certain country, country only, or like maybe in that, yeah, in that country only. And then maybe gross domestic would be like, the overall kind of that. No, never mind. That doesn't make sense either.
You were right, but you told it opposite. So
Okay.
domestic means that within the boundaries of the country,
Okay.
domestic would include the production of citizens of country X. Also, if people from country Y are producing in country X, their produce is also going to be included in GDP of country X.
Okay. Makes sense.
Anything that is produced within the boundaries of country X is going to be gross domestic product, even if they are not produced by the citizens themselves.
Okay, so whatever is produced in that, within that country, even if it's people from country Y in country X producing it, it will be considered domestic then. Yes.
Exactly.
Okay, makes sense.
Gross national income means people of country X, whether they're producing in country X or they're producing in any other country, all of their incomes are combined in order to calculate gross national income.
Okay. Now, why would you do, okay, let's say if you're in Pakistan, or I'm in, like, let's say India, and I'm producing in India and you're producing in Pakistan, why would you calculate my income with yours as well? Because, but aren't we living in different places? So wouldn't it be domestic then?
So can you ask your question again? Sorry, you lagged a bit.
Sorry, so you're saying in national, it's like, so would it be in national, would it be like, let's say if we're all citizens of, we're all Pakistani residents, okay? But I go live, work in, like, let's say, Sri Lanka, for example, wherever I go. Would when you're calculating the gross national income, why would you also take my income if I'm not in country, like in Pakistan or country X or whatever?
It's because your origin is Pakistan, right?
Okay. Okay,
So
okay.
your human capital belongs to Pakistan.
Makes sense. Yeah.
So that is why we take in gross national income, we take the incomes of all Pakistanis who are working anywhere and we add them into our GDP.
Uh,
GDP plus foreign income, and foreign income by by residents of X. Of X means country X, all
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
we
yeah.
subtract income of residents of other countries.
Makes sense.
So see, if you're born in Pakistan, you're always called a Pakistani national,
Yes.
right? That is what you can deduce from this name as well. So all nationals of Pakistan would have their income added in order to get to gross national income, whether they're in Pakistan or not. And all that those who are not nationals of Pakistan, their income is going to be subtracted from the GDP in order to get to incomes.
Okay, so that's what national is, and domestic is that, let's say someone is working in country X, and then country Y citizen comes to country X and they start producing for country X. Their income will also be calculated in the domestic income then.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, makes sense. Makes sense.
Now, so and this was one other concept that you need to study when you're studying economic growth. Because if there is an increase in national income, that also somehow leads to an increase in your economic growth, because there are many Pakistanis who send remittances back to Pakistan,
Yes. Yes. Okay.
right? So
Yes.
that is also sort of injection into the economy,
Makes
and that causes the economy or the resources in the economy to increase.
makes sense.
Now let's move towards per capita. Per capita means per person.
Okay.
All right. Now GDP per capita means per person GDP. Like
Yes.
if, for example, your GDP is 100 and people living in the country are 50, so your GDP per capita will be 2. Like each person is contributing 2 units towards GDP
Okay,
on
so you're
average.
saying, let's say if the person, if you, if I have a GDP of 100 and overall, what is the 50 then again? Sorry.
50 is the total population.
Okay, okay, makes sense.
GDP is for the country, right? So in
Yeah,
order to see that GDP per capita is basically a measure of seeing how well the people are um and how well settled or how much the people are enjoying higher living standards,
makes
right?
sense.
So this means that from 100 GDP and 50 people, rupees 2 or and 2 units of the GDP are going to each citizen.
Makes sense.
All right. So GDP per capita's calculation is basically GDP divided by total population.
Okay, makes sense.
The purpose is just to see if there is, it's like the average level of GDP per head of population.
Yeah, so it's to see how people are really doing,
Yes,
their standard of living and everything, and if they're satisfied. Okay, yeah,
exactly.
makes sense.
Now, let me give you a question
Sure.
and you calculate it and then you tell me that which country has better GDP per capita, all right?
Yeah, sure.
So we have China, whose GDP is USD 11,199,145. Then we have Malaysia, whose GDP is USD 296,359. So
Mm,
on the face of it, you can see that China's GDP is higher, and you can tell that maybe they are experiencing higher economic growth, right?
yes, so 296,357, right?
Yes.
Okay.
But you actually get to experience, or you actually get to tell if they have better economic growth only if their GDP per capita is also
High.
higher than that of Malaysia. Now
Yeah.
the population is 137,000,079,000,000, and
Mm,
here the population is 31 million.
yes.
All right, now you can calculate and tell me.
Mm, 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 mm. Mm, 37, Okay, so the higher the GDP per capita, the better. So that way, if we look at that, then Malaysia has the higher GDP per capita.
Malaysia, and how much is it?
I got 0.00955.
No, so you have to divide your GDP by your population, not your population by your GDP. So to calculate GDP per capita for China, you would take 111,99145 divided by 1379.
Yeah, that's what I got.
You got 0 point?
1, 2, 3. 0.00812.
No, but if I do this, I get a different answer. See, if I do this.
You divide GDP by the population.
1, 3, 7. This is also million.
Oh, okay. You didn't say million. You just,
Yeah, I think I missed it.
yeah.
Yeah. So I think we'll get the right answer now.
99145 divided by 1379. 8121.
Exactly, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, sorry, my mistake.
No worries. 8121, and then for the other one, it'd just be 296,357 divided by 3. 9559. 9559. So the better GDP per capita is for Malaysia because they have 9,559.9.
Exactly. So now we know that Malaysia is a better performing economy than China.
Yes.
All right. Now let's move on and discuss the reasons as to why our economic growth can happen, like short run or
So-
long run. Yes.
So if we were to analyze this, we could say even though the GDP of China is greater than Malaysia, the GDP per capita of Malaysia is greater than China. Therefore, Malaysia is doing better.
Exactly.
Okay.
So you'll say that by looking at the GDP per capita, we can tell that people in Malaysia are enjoying higher living standards, and that actually shows that they are a better performing economy.
Makes sense. Perfect.
Okay.
Mhm.
Now let's look at the reasons. Short-term economic growth occurs if there is an increase in aggregate demand or an increase in aggregate supply.
Okay.
Short-run aggregate supply.
Yes.
Now, the reasons for these increases are going to be the same as we have discussed before.
Mhm.
Can you think of any reason as to why your aggregate demand can shift?
So we talked about how like there's maybe more opportunities, so that's supply, sorry. For aggregate demand, so there's like people have greater incomes now, and so therefore they're more likely to consume more, so they have higher demands.
Exactly. So any sort of this thing that shifts your aggregate demand or aggregate supply, it could be an increase in government spending, it could be an increase or cut in income, it could be cut in income tax, it could be an increase in consumption and increase in investment.
Yeah.
So these will shift your sorry?
For exports, right?
Exactly. Or
Yeah.
exports, this is going to increase your aggregate demand, and that is going to cause short-run economic growth.
Yes. Okay.
Similarly, if there is maybe a cut in cost of production or labor is more productive, any sort of this thing that shifts your aggregate supply curve, that is also going to lead to short-run economic growth.
Makes sense.
But in order to achieve long-run economic growth, we'll have to improve the capital in the economy.
Okay.
Or we'll have to increase technology or efficiency in the economy.
Okay, so technology, efficiency, and capital to improve long run.
Capital and also labor. So human capital.
Okay.
Capital would include labor and other machinery as well. So technology and labor are part of capital. If we improve both of those things, then it is going to lead to long run economic growth.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
All right. So do you know the economic or business cycle?
For the didn't we discuss one of the cycles, the leakage and the injections?
No, that's an income flow cycle.
Oh, okay, no, I don't know the economic cycle.
Oh, it's like this. So this part is basically called your growth.
Yes, okay.
Okay. This is your growth. This is boom. This is recession. This is slump. And this is recovery.
Okay.
So these 2 points are where your economic growth is happening.
Okay. And the growth and boom, yeah, okay.
In recession, your economic growth is falling. In slump, there is no economic growth,
Makes sense.
or maybe there is negative economic growth. And then
Okay.
in recovery, again, your economic growth starts.
Makes sense.
Okay.
Mhm.
I think that is it for this chapter.
Yeah,
We can discuss the multiple choice questions. Give me a minute.
sure.
Share this. Just one. When is your coursework submission?
Mhm. It's due on the 22nd, so in 2 days.
All right.
Okay.
Let's do this, and then we'll get to the.
So the first one. 6 diagonal.
Are you calculating the first one?
Yeah. Mhm. Mm, mm, mm. Different. That's gonna be C 112000.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. A recession is defined as a fall in GDP, a fall in national income, 2 months of negative economic growth, 2 quarters of a net negative.
All right. So I forgot to tell you this, that the recession
Isn't it
is
A?
yes, exactly. So if there are 2 quarters of negative economic growth, then we say that the economy is in recession.
Yeah, makes sense. Long run economic growth can be shown by a shift to the right of the LRS, right?
A shift to the right. Yes.
Explain the difference between short run and long run economic. So we said the way a short run economic growth can be shown is if there's an increase in investment, if there's an increase in, like, let's say, income, government spending and exports, that can show an increase in the aggregate demand, right? And then the long run economic growth can be like an increase in resources or more efficiency, and so there's more sources available, so that's why there's going to be an increase or a shift to the right in the long run, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly.
So the two stages of the economic cycle are, so it's first there's what's the word I was looking for? So there's what was the word? Oh my God, something and boom.
Yeah, there was, I cannot even remember it, but
No, okay, it's
there was
okay.
growth,
Yes,
growth.
growth, then boom, then there's recession, slump, and then there's recovery. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Explain what is meant by nominal economic growth. So nominal economic growth, like we discussed, was how you use the current output with current prices, and it's to see how well you're doing in that certain year, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Through the 2000s, China saw strong economic growth. These Chinese governments is seeking to continue this growth at a rate of over 6%, but the economy appears to have been slowing down since 2015. Some of the drivers of economic growth include a large population of working age, massive amounts of investment, and a high level of productivity. Explain one possible reason why the Chinese government has a policy of economic growth. A large population working as a single economy per have been slowing down. Okay, so some of the drivers of economic large population. Okay, explain one possible reason why the Chinese government has a policy of economic growth. So why is it facing economic growth?
Yes.
Because
What was one policy that China used for economic growth?
um, what would it be? I don't know. Investment. So would it be like government spending? So that isn't that the fiscal then?
Um, you're saying that it could be government spending?
Because it talks about investments, not no?
Yes, that is talking about investments. And I'm trying to understand the question here. Explain one possible reason why the Chinese government has a policy of economic growth. The question doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, me neither. That's why I looked for words, but on the only word I can find is investments. That makes me think that maybe the government is spending or has intervention or anything like that.
Yeah, I think just leave this question and
Okay,
I'll think about it after the class is over and I'll get back to you
sure.
on this question.
Sure, no worries. Evaluate the possible consequences for China's economy of slowing of economic growth. Okay, so a possible consequences for China's economy of slowing of economic growth, could it not lead to like people losing jobs, therefore people not having the income to consume, therefore it lowering demand, therefore it affecting revenue and tax and all everything like that?
Yes, and you can also talk about when a country has larger population, and then we also knew that China has a very famous one-child policy, right?
Okay.
So when they had a one-child policy, and then their working population was a lot, right? So people didn't find an incentive to earn money
Uh,
because they had no offsprings. They didn't know because parents usually earn money in order to provide good lifestyle to their children.
yes.
But when they
Yes.
don't have children, their purpose in life actually is no more there, right?
Yes, makes
So
sense.
that is one reason as to why people started becoming unproductive. And when
So
they became
there's
unproductive,
less
they were
incentive, less motivation to be
yes,
productive. Yeah, yeah, makes
yes.
sense. Okay, okay, okay. Evaluate the main causes of economic growth in the UK.
Okay,
Well,
so this is something that you'll have to study, like you'll have to
yeah,
research. So maybe in next Tuesday's class, because you'll be done with your coursework on Thursday, right?
yes, yes,
So
inshallah.
you'll be free after that.
Yes,
So maybe try maybe not writing the entire answer, but writing bullet points and then you can explain them to me in the class.
sure, makes sense. Yeah, I could do
Also
that.
bring in all these concepts, real GDP, GDP per capita, and all of those things so that you like are very, very clear about what we've studied today.
Yeah, makes sense. I wanted to ask one question in regards to my
Yeah.
coursework. So I wanted to say, like, in the evaluation part, because I still have to finish that. Because it says what policies would be better, so like suggest which one. So, and my teacher said, like, let's say even if you suggest like, oh, they should use a fiscal policy and what's the other one? Fiscal and
Monetary.
monetary policy. So, and he said, like, let's say if you say do both, or you say, oh, they should do demand side policies and they should do supply side policies, I should be saying why. So, but I think when I was looking at everything, because I was writing the supply side policy, it made me understand, kind of, it made me feel like there wasn't that much of an impact really. And it didn't have, because I was reading stuff as well, and they said it doesn't guarantee like an effect on the demand side of it really. So I was focusing
Yeah.
on that. I should focus on, I would suggest in the evaluation part that I suggest demand side policies should be implemented. And the case study they give us is talking about the Bank of England and everything. What then, can I open it really quickly and maybe you can suggest what policy I should like evaluate and say, okay, maybe
Let
they
me
should end
let
up
you
with
share. Yes, sure. Let you share screen with.
it. Um,
All right, go ahead.
yeah, just give me 1 minute. Yes. Okay. Um, okay. Um, sorry. No. 6. God. Sorry.
All right, so
Yeah. So if I look at, so this is the background they've given us here.
all right. Wait, I'll have to read it. Maybe I can take a screenshot of it.
Yeah. So I've talked about, like, you can see in the document I provided as well, like I've talked about both fiscal and monetary and everything, but I'm thinking for the evaluation part, I'm going to suggest demand side policy because I think it's more effective. But I want to see, like, if I want to go deeper into the evaluation, like if they say, okay, yeah, you choose demand side policy, which policy in like monetary will you use, or which policy in fiscal will you use that you think will affect this whole background situation that they've given us?
Yeah, so I think you should write it, that what policy and you are choosing, because that would give your teacher an idea that you have understood the assignment and that you are like you have well researched the paper.
Because in monetary, like I was looking at it, so monetary is both interest rate and then what's the other one? Supplies management. What
Money
was
supply.
money supply? I didn't go into much detail because they said that the UK usually focuses on interest rates. So I was thinking when I do the evaluation, I'll talk about, yeah, I suggest that demand side policy is more effective. In demand side policy, for monetary policy, I think the UK, like the Bank of England, should follow an interest rate policy with the, because the fiscal policy is government intervention or like spending, and what's it called? What is it? The last one, taxation, right?
Yes.
So if I suggest interest rate, let's say if I say in the demand side, I suggest that the Bank of England or for the UK inflation problem right now, they should keep going with interest rate. And for fiscal policy, should I suggest government spending, so less government spending, or taxation?
So in monetary policy, are you suggesting to increase the interest rate or to decrease the interest rates?
Over here, they talked about increasing the interest rate.
Yes, so you'll have to mention that that you want them to increase the interest rate, and that is expansionary, or there are like, do you know there are two types of economic policies?
Expansionary and contractionary, right?
Exactly. So increase in interest rate, would it be an expansionary monetary policy or contractionary?
Wouldn't it be contractionary because the more you increase it, the lower the demand will go?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you think that UK should use a contractionary monetary policy?
Yes.
And because in this case study, since I have not read it, so are they looking to decrease their economic growth? What is their main ultimate objective?
So they say they want to meet the inflation target of 2%.
All right, they want to meet the inflation target of 2%,
Yeah.
the cost of borrowing increase. Okay, yes, perfect. So you're using contractionary monetary policy.
Yes.
And then for fiscal, you can increase taxes. So when you increase taxes, people will have less income. And when they have less income, they would spend less. And when they spend less, your inflation is going to come down.
Perfect. Makes sense.
Also, a
Thank-
decrease in government spending could also lead to a fall in inflation rate. Because again, when government is not spending anywhere, people are getting less income out of it, right? And when
Yeah,
they're getting less income out of it, they are going to consume less, and that is going to affect the overall inflation in the economy.
makes sense. Thank you so much.
No problem. Also, Khadija, I would suggest that when you are researching, see if UK is a consumer-led economy. Because if it is not a consumer-led economy, then your main tool will be monetary policy.
Okay, so if it's
And
if it is
Mhm.
consumer, then I should follow monetary.
Then you should follow fiscal.
Okay, if it's okay, and if it's not consumer led, I should follow monetary.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. And why is that? Because so fiscal is basically what's it called? Consumer led would be like the
Like the GDP is entirely dependent on what consumers demand and consume.
okay,
Like
and so
consumption is the main component in aggregate demand, but when we are like looking at monetary policy, when it is not a consumer-led economy, then the main driving force of aggregate demand is investment, right?
okay, because fiscal is usually to do with like income and people's spending and consumption.
Yes,
Therefore, if UK is consumer led, based more majority of its GDP is consumption based. Therefore, fiscal should be used. If it's not
exactly.
consumer led, it means that it's going to be monetary because it has more to do with the interest rate, loans, and everything like that. Then
Yes,
makes
exactly.
sense. Perfect. Makes sense. That's good advice. Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you so much.
No
Take
problem, Khadija. Take care.
you
Bye.
too.